Hi, so I'm going to be giving you a brief introduction to destruction myths. And the idea here is that we're going to briefly go over what they're really about. And you should have answered in the first question of your destruction activity regarding, what you thought they might be about. And so this is to give you a little bit of information about destruction myths themselves and allow you to kind of compare and contrast what this might look like for you compared to what they're really meant to demonstrate or teach us. So in asking the question, what are destruction myths? We can see a few points here. We can see that destruction myths are more about creation rather than annihilation. So we might immediately think of a destruction myth as if, some apocalyptic ending and then there's nothing afterwards. But the emphasis here is more on creating something new rather than wiping out something old. And you can see with the second bullet point here, the cosmic cycle of creation and destruction. The idea being that in life we see these patterns of creation and destruction, things coming into being, things dying. And so it's sort of out with the old and with the new. We see this with the changing of the seasons. It's also a message of rebirth and hope. So where we see the world might not be doing so well, humanity might not be doing so well, destruction myths are meant to be a story for something new, to hope for something new or better. And lastly, there's an emphasis on the positive aspects of human existence. So rather than focusing on why humanity is being wiped out in these destruction myths, there's something more to be said about the remaking of the world, and that the characteristics that are essential to survival will be found in the beings that do survive these destruction myths. And so there's sort of a message or a teaching for us to learn from the beings who do survive these destruction stories. So we read about two different kinds of destruction in this chapter. One is by flood, and this is in the stories of Gilgamesh, the Bible, Ovid's Metamorphoses, and as well as by fire, which we'll see in Prose Edda. But it's fascinating because if we look at destruction myths by flood, we'll see that these stories we can often relate to the geography of the people. And so, for example, in Mesopotamia, we see that the ground becomes saturated from continuous heavy rains, causing rivers to rise and overflow their banks. But however, in the desert southwest, we will see that the land is dry and rocky. And what happens is that when the rains will run off rapidly rather than soaking in, and they'll cause flash floods and flooding in areas where no rain has fallen. And so it's fascinating to think about destruction stories coming from maybe perhaps desert southwest areas, because destruction seems to have come from nowhere in these examples, and it makes sense why there might have been this amazing flooding and destruction coming out of nowhere when we consider the geography of the people telling that story. And regarding fire, we can really see this link between an old world order and a new world order. So in these fire destruction tales, we might see, a total annihilation of what existed before. But the idea here is that we're making room for a new earth, for new human beings. But with the example of Prose Edda, we'll see that these new beings still worship the old gods, so Thor and Odin. And this sort of creates that connection between the old order and the new. And if you look on page 183 in your textbook, you'll see a chart here that provides a comparison of accounts of the flood myths between Gilgamesh, the Bible, and Metamorphoses. Everything ranging from causes of the flooding to the rewards of this destruction. It's quite fascinating. So please spend some time taking a look at that contrast. And lastly, we'll see some common themes running regarding new creation after the destruction. So some of these themes might be that the destruction of the world is followed by a renewal of the earth. And we'll also see a repopulation by the righteous survivors, so the beings who are meant to sort of exhibit or demonstrate the kinds of characters we should be. These are cautionary tales that remind us not to sin or we will be punished. And lastly, they are teachings of how to behave properly as members of a community, that relating and linking back to the righteous survivors. So what can these righteous survivors teach us about being members of a community? Anyways, I hope that that gives you a little bit of insight about destruction myths and gives you a little bit of something to compare with your own initial ideas and thoughts, and I'm curious to see what you have to say.